Welcome friends to another rSlash ProRevenge video. Today we've got a great story of awesome work bonuses being taken away from somebody. But first, a story from Personal Suspect 7805, getting Karen kicked out. So about 2 years ago, I started waitressing at a small family-owned restaurant in my small town. Everyone that came in were regulars, and we all talked. Well, one morning my parents came in with my 5 younger siblings. I was waiting on them while the other waitress got the table next to them, so I wasn't paying attention to that table. There was only one man and woman, both older and I'd never seen them before. I'm taking care of my family and bringing their food out and going to my other tables when the table next to my family apparently starts calling me a dumb witch and saying other incredibly inappropriate things about me with my young siblings sitting right there. I don't know about any of this when I come to my parents to refill their drinks, and the lady at the other table starts yelling at me. I'm dumbfounded because I had no idea what's going on. Apparently the other waitress hadn't come to get their drink order. My mom then proceeded to yell at her, "If it's that much of a problem, leave. Don't yell at my daughter for something that has nothing to do with her." At that, the owner came out and kicked the couple out, and I haven't seen them since. If you go to a restaurant and you sit down and you get seated somewhere and let's say 10-15 minutes go by and they still haven't even gotten your drink order, does it become acceptable to be a little snippy with the waitress? Or is this a situation where you try to call for a manager or just get up and leave? Is it okay to have an attitude at that point? Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Our next story is from Dramatic Move 8793, entitled "Ex-Husband Gets What He Deserves." After dealing with my husband, 29-year-old male, cheating on me and loudly disrespecting me for 2 years, I, 23-year-old female, finally left him 4 months ago. He assumed no responsibility for the marital bills, and I had to sell the house and his truck by myself. When I left him, there was also a $400 phone bill in both of our names. I ended up just paying the overdue bill a few months ago under the stipulation that my ex-husband gives me $200 for his share. He did give me $90, but then he laughed at me for expecting him to pay me the other $110, stating that he doesn't owe me anything. About a week ago, I went into the store of my current cell phone provider and learned that I'm paying twice as much as I should be paying for phone service because I'm still being charged $40 a month for my ex-husband's phone. There's still $800+ owed on it. I learned that the remaining balance was not transferred over when he switched his phone number to his own account because he failed to sign the required paperwork. I explained the situation to my ex-husband, and he was more than willing to join a conference call with me in customer service to get the remaining balance transferred to his own account. We had spent approximately 20 minutes on the phone before my ex-husband told the customer service woman that he's making payments on his own phone through his own accounts, that he doesn't have a clue what I'm talking about, and that whatever I've called to inquire about is clearly not even his business. Then he hung up. So today, I spoke with customer service again and learned that I technically own my ex-husband's phone since it's in my name. So I made a police report. I reported the phone as stolen, and it's now flagged and shut off. Now that's exactly what a jerk like that deserves. I hate to hear any story of any partner after the fact trying to take advantage of the other, especially if they're in a better overall position financially. It's pretty darn enjoyable to think about this husband being somewhere and realizing their phone service doesn't work anymore. And honestly, I think I would rather just keep tipping the cops rather than telling them that they reported them to the police. I mean, they literally are trying to steal $800+ from OP. Our next story is from Reaper0221. Is it a really bad idea to make a government employee angry? This one is a double government employee event, and what you should know is if you get the attention of a government employee and make them angry, they will make your life a living heck. The setup is that I was working for a local county government in the permitting department that handled drainage and floodplain enforcement. I received a complaint from a homeowner, nice guy, lived next door to a house that was part of an incorporated village, not nice guy. Nice guy lived in an unincorporated portion of the county, and hence the call to me as an agent of the county. I drove out to the site and to investigate, and discovered some interesting facts. The permitting agent for the village allowed the incorporated homeowner to fill his lot, affecting the drainage, which caused the unincorporated lot to flood every time there was more than anything than light rain. Nice guy indicated that there was some tension between him and not nice guy. And part of the issue was that the nice guy and his partner were a gay couple. This ran up a red flag for me, but in trying to be impartial, I took the information and some photos for the file and indicated that I would contact the village to find a resolution. I wrote a letter and then called the village inspector, Jack Wagon, to discuss. I was told by Jack Wagon that the village could do it as pleased and that I could do nothing to stop Not Nice Guy from doing as they pleased, as it was approved by the village. Then there was a comment about those type of people, the gay couple, making complaints just to cause trouble. I was now on the case, and it was time to make sure everything done on the incorporated lot was 100% legal. At this point, the game certainly was on now, because if there's one thing that grinds my gears, it's bullying. I went back out and spoke to the nice guy to let them know what I was up to, and also that I wasn't going to let this slide. I then started investigating the elevations on the two lots and what fill had been placed on the incorporated lot. The not nice guy came out and started getting belligerent about my presence and ongoing investigation. He incorrectly stated that I didn't have jurisdiction over his lot and that he'd be calling the police. I patiently listened and then pulled out my two-way radio and requested that the home base dispatch both a village and a county police unit to the location. I then indicated that since there was a regulatory floodplain on his lot, I did in fact have jurisdiction, and that I would be exercising my right to determine the impact of his fill activities upon that floodplain. Both of the police units showed up and I let them know what was going on. They were both appropriately agitated to have wasted their time and let Not Nice go that I was within my authority to proceed with the investigation. A little while later, while I was measuring things, Jack Wagon showed up. He started berating me about harassing the village resident and threatening to call my boss and filing a complaint and so forth. I invited him to do so, quoting which parts of the code he should indicate I was violating. I was using marking paint to show the limits of the floodplain for the photos for the file, and what do you know? Jack Wagon's shoe got painted when he tried to stop me. Obviously, he was more angry, as was the homeowner, due to very bright orange paint in the grass in his yard. I pointed out that I'd done the same on the neighboring lots, but they just kept complaining. It was actually marking chalk that comes off pretty easily. Interestingly, I found two really wrong things on Not Nice Guy's lot. One, there was fill placed in the floodplain, and two, a garden shed was built on the fill and partially within the floodplain. Both are a big no-no and are actually against federal law. So the course of action had two parts. One, make the incorporated homeowner remove the fill and shed from the floodplain, and two, let Nice Guy place fill in their lot outside of the floodplain to counteract the fill remaining in Not Nice Guy's lot outside of the floodplain. I also told Nice Guy it would be a good idea to run a field tile on their side to drain the water that would inevitably pond up between the two lots when it rained. Predictably, Not Nice Guy and Jack Wagon got super angry when I sent the letter out that there were violations that either had to be corrected, remove fill and shed, or apply for a revision of the floodplain with the Army Corps of Engineers. Good luck with that. This then led to a meeting at the county office with Not Nice Guy, Jack Wagon, my supervisor, and myself. Quickly, things went to 11 and there was yelling by Jack Wagon about abuse of power, etc. The department head came into the conference room and told them both they were wrong and that they should leave peacefully and calmly or face the consequences. Fines. The best part was that Not Nice Guy had to apply for a permit, and guess who was the one to review and approve it? That's right, yours truly. Now, I was following the letter of the law, but you have to know that poor government workers are underpaid and overworked. Strangely, the permit for Nice Guy was almost immediately approved, while Not Nice Guy had to have a very thorough review to ensure it was correct. You could make a case I was abusing my power, but I can assure you that the timing for their review was well within acceptable limits. Also, how could I be held to account that they misfiled 3 times before they finally got it right? Generally, if you behaved like a civil human and came to the office, we would help you get things done properly so the permit would go through the first time. But Not Nice Guy decided he could do it all on his own, so it took him 3 tries. Had he come to the office, I would have given him the same service as others. But he decided to take the hard route, and therefore, I didn't give a single inch when it came to the submission being perfectly correct. Ultimately, the situation was resolved, but it took a lot more effort than it should have. Moral of the story, don't be an entitled, homophobic jerk. I like to believe that this whole situation for Not a Nice Guy was a direct result of them being a bad person. Them being an entitled jerk, I'm sure, factored heavily in them making all of these decisions, and I think where that took them was completely their fault. Our next story is from Ice Pyro 87. Wanna have parties while I'm away? Guess you get what you get. So this was back in 2007, 2008 or so. I'd been living in an apartment with a roommate that turned out to be a raging alcoholic. Things mostly weren't bad, and we both had friends over and couch surfers and the like. Well, our apartment wasn't in the greatest of shape. Some airsoft divots in the walls from a few jerk friends, carpets stained and dirty, but they were old when we moved in, etc. But nothing that wasn't repairable. It comes time to move out, we have a few weeks left, and I'm at that apartment maybe 3 or 4 days out of the week, and spending the others at my grandparents' house. I got sent to work at a secondary work location, and that made more sense than driving 45 minutes each way. So in my time at the apartment, I'm spending time packing everything I own into my little 90s Mazda Protege, getting ready to move to Arizona, and dealing with vacation time and transferring outside my district for work. On top of all that, I'm spending a ton of time cleaning, patching holes, etc. I leave for a few days and come back to an empty apartment. There's bags full of empty bottles and cans in the kitchen nearly waist deep, and a beautiful hole punched in the wall near the bathroom stuffed with bendy straws. So I take care of all of that, get the stuff to patch the hole, and then leave for a few more days of work, knowing that I would have to get back for the walkthrough inspection the day after my last workday. I had messaged my roommate and told him that he needed to get color match paint and paint over the repairs that I did to the hole, and he didn't do it. So I show up at the apartment with a couple hours to go until the walkthrough in order to polish up on any little things, only to find that he never painted. The one thing I asked him to do, and it's not done. So I run to Ace, get the paint over, and open all the windows so the smell can dissipate. Then the walkthrough happens, and they say they can smell the fresh paint but can't tell where it is. So I must have done one heck of a repair job. Darn right. Cue petty revenge. When we got the deposit back, it was sent to me, and since I had to spend so much time and effort cleaning and repairing the apartment and didn't get any help in return, I instead told my roommate that they charged us for the carpets and pocketed that money instead. Wasn't a lot of money, probably about half of what I would have been paid as a handyman doing the same repair work. Usually I'm not the biggest fan of withholding information like that when it comes to somebody who honestly is entitled to some of that deposit money. But honestly, I feel like we can all kind of agree this guy wasn't really entitled to it. They didn't do anything to make sure that they would actually get that money back. Why should the one guy who did make sure they got that money back be the one that gives up half of it for doing all the work alone? Our next story is from Bad Touch 1981. Office neighbor doesn't respect closed door, suffers consequences. I work with a guy who shows no respect for a closed door. Doesn't matter if I'm in a meeting with a client or colleague, having a personal conversation on the phone, or just trying to focus on getting something done. Every time he wants to talk, he'll just fling the door open and start yabbering. I'm sure he knows that he's a little freaker and probably gets off on it. There's numerous other issues with this guy, but the door is really what gets to me. I could have dealt with this a few ways, like politely asking him to stop, putting a sign on my door, or even locking myself in my office, but he isn't deserving of most of them. So rather than stopping him from coming into my office unannounced, I decided it would be much more fun to stop him from going into his own office. All the doors in my building lock from the inside with a simple push button, but only the cleaner and the office manager have a key. So one day, I figured it would be fun to quietly lock his door when he was out, so that the next time he arrived, he'd be inconvenienced for 5 minutes or so until he got a hold of the key. The first time I did this, it was satisfying, but definitely needed more work. So over the next few months, I would pick random times to lock the door, sometimes before he arrived in the morning, sometimes during the day when he stepped out for a break. It was enough to be annoying, but not so much as to arouse suspicion. Needless to say, he's still a pain in everyone's butt, but at least I know he doesn't get to rudely barge into every office he wants to enter. Honestly, what would have made this story better is hearing that this guy tried to innocently barge in on a room, only to end up bashing their head against the door because they just assumed the door would open. I don't really get the idea that if you're working in some kind of office, that you can just barge on into any room. This next story is from HeadDrag1440. You want to kick me out of the house I paid to get into? Enjoy no utilities. The time was 2004. I was 20 and very inexperienced in life. I had moved to Arizona and rushed into a relationship with a guy, moving in together within 2 to 3 months of meeting. I made the mistake of telling him I had money, a lump sum I'd received from my dad's VA back benefits. He was always encouraging me to spend it, and I didn't think anything of it because I loved him. I paid $1,500 to move into our rental, rent, deposit, all utilities. He signed a piece of paper to pay me back half, but never did, and I ended up moving back to Washington and just left it all behind me. After 5 months of living together, he told me he didn't want this kind of commitment. And yes, it was right after I ran out of my money. I couldn't afford this house on my own, so I was already looking for an apartment. But after a fight, he told me he wanted me out in 2 days. Alright, jerk, you want me out in 2 days? I went to the electrical company, cable company, and gas company and moved or disconnected all services. I gave no heads up and waited. 2 days later, he called and was calling me a witch. He had no hot water, no lights, and no gas for his stove. Screw you, Matt. Screw you. Good, I hope Matt sat in that dark, empty house and thought about how much of a jerk they were being. Probably not, though. They probably sat there blaming OP for everything. Matt not only needs to stop being a jerk, Matt needs to pull himself together too. Our next story is from Little Red Bird 1991. Don't like my silly job? You don't get its silly perks. So I work in a technical theater as an assistant stage manager. There's a couple of theaters in this area, but the tech community is rather small, so we all know each other. I work for a smaller theater, but I know a few people who work at the largest theater that hosts the traveling Broadway shows. These shows are really popular and hard to get tickets for if you aren't a season ticket holder, and season tickets can run about $1,000 per seat for 7 shows. Tickets are normally about $150 for an individual show, but can go up significantly if they know the show is going to be popular. The husband of one of the directors that I work with is on the board of the theater and sometimes can score good seats at a discounted rate. This season, Aladdin is coming to town, a show my future mother-in-law has been dying to see. She asked me if I could possibly get her and a friend a seat so they could go see it. I called in a favor with my director, and she managed to get 2 prime seats. Since her husband's on the board, she gets a discount, so the tickets ended up being only $75 for the 2 seats. I reserved them in my name with the understanding that future mother-in-law will pay for the tickets. Fast forward a couple of weeks, and future mother-in-law invites me and my fiancé over for dinner. Dinner goes well, and I end up in a conversation with future mother-in-law and future sister-in-law about housework. I don't know why. Future sister-in-law is a teacher, and she's married to an accountant. So she said that her and her husband try to split the chores 50-50. Future mother-in-law thought that that was fine and asked how fiancé and I would do it. We don't currently live together. I said, probably the same, 50-50. Future sister-in-law agreed, but future mother-in-law gave me the stink eye. I asked if there was something wrong, and she said, well, fiancé works full-time and you don't, so I don't see how that's fair. I told her that I do work full-time, just not at a 9 to 5 like fiancé. Future mother-in-law then laughed at me and said what I did wasn't real work and that it was just a silly side gig, and that maybe if I got a real job I would know what it's like to really work. Then she changed the subject. This pissed me off because I'm very proud of the work I do. It may not be a 9 to 5, but I love my job. It's my dream job and I do make enough to cover my expenses. It actually takes a certain amount of skill to properly stage manage a full-scale production. So, enter pettiness. I called up the box office for the large theater and told them to cancel the tickets. They were in my name, so they gladly canceled them. I then texted future mother-in-law and told her if she thinks my job isn't real, then the side perks aren't real. So the tickets were canceled. I then shut off my phone. The next day, when I turn on my phone, I see several missed calls and about a dozen texts from future mother-in-law. She's fuming because her friend's coming into town specifically to see this play. I called back and told her she might be able to get seats if she called the box office. She ended up getting seats, but they cost her $150 each, and they weren't as good. Hopefully she learned not to insult someone and still expect to benefit from them. What I hate here is it's such a needlessly theoretical and speculative topic for them to die on. Like OP said, they don't even live together right now, so how do they really know how it's going to shake out? All OP said was, probably 50-50. Who knows, we'll make it work, right? Nah, gotta get all snooty about it, how dare you try to take advantage of him? As if the people who are planning to get married aren't ready to try to compensate and work with each other. Our next story is from Gaspronomib. Enforce your crappy non-compete? Say goodbye to our account? This happened back in the early 2000s. I was director of a smallish business unit of a largish company. We used a highly specific software tool, which did its job extremely well. Unfortunately, finding candidates with experience in that tool was very difficult, owing to the small installation base and how technical it was. One of the team members from our first implementation was a young kid, almost fresh out of college. Sharp guy. He ran rings around the other consultants and was the de facto systems architect, delivery manager, and lead developer, despite there being other very expensive consultants in those roles. He and his team finished well under time and budget, and left us with a well-running system that we used every single day. About 3 years later, I got a lateral promotion and needed to backfill my position. I remembered the one guy and thought he would be perfect despite his relative greenness. So I reached out and asked if he would be interested. He had moved on from that company. They made good stuff, but they were toxic as freak. He said he was very interested, but sadly had not been able to get work using the tool because the non-compete he had to sign precluded him from working with the tool or in any related field, regardless of whether or not the employer and client was a customer of the company. In fact, reading the NDA/non-compete, it could easily have been interpreted as precluding him from working anywhere, since just about any sizable company could in theory have made use of the product. I checked with our legal department, and nothing in our contract with them prevented me from hiring the guy. It was only his NDA/non-compete that stood in the way. Our lawyers advised just dropping the subject, just in case they sued him and added us. We would win, but it would be a pain in the butt and take so long that we wouldn't need the guy anymore. Being stubborn, I took that as a challenge and reached out to his former boss. I explained the situation and how the guy wasn't their employee anymore anyway, so there really wasn't any competition to begin with. He countered with an offer to rehire the guy and let him come on board as my replacement. That didn't fly because we didn't source directors or above from consulting firms. Plus, they wanted an absurdly high hourly rate. I offered to pay a generous finder's fee to set aside the NDA/non-compete agreement. They refused, saying that they simply did not allow anyone to work in that field or for any current, past, or prospective clients for 4 years after they left their company. That went on for nearly 6 months, in which time our annual contract renewal process kicked off. With legal's help, I proposed an addendum offering an even larger finder's fee. No dice. They declined. Not part of their business model. Not allowed under their current operating procedures. Nope. Nuh-uh, not gonna. This despite the fact that this NDA/non-compete would expire in just over a year. What they failed to take into consideration was that we were also in the middle of a company-wide series of recompetes, i.e., evaluating existing tools and exploring new ones at the time. They had literally submitted a request for proposal response during this whole back and forth. Honestly, I don't think they cared, being the incumbent vendor and having what was probably the best product at the time. To them, it was just a pro forma exercise. They even reused their response from the original RFP. The thing is, staffing was one of the RFP selection criteria. That was their critical error. Staffing had been traditionally given a low weight because of all these tools being pretty esoteric and hard to find anyone to work on or with. We rarely even worried about it, assigning the default 5 out of 10 to every vendor. Obviously, based on this company, that needed to change. So the next meeting of the RFP committee, I related our guy's story and suggested we rethink our prioritization rules. Everyone agreed, and so we upped the weight to 10, on a range of 1 being not important and 10 being vitally important. Because the selection criteria had changed, we re-evaluated all the proposals with an eye towards staffing. Most vendors' submissions rated about the same as before, but the incumbent's vendor's rating in the staffing category dropped to a 0 out of 10. The incumbent vendor went from top slot to 2/3 down the list and got a do not purchase flag due to a 0 in a critically weighted criterion. I had kept our CIO in the loop this whole time, so it was no surprise to him when the RFP committee submitted their recommendation. I asked if he preferred to just use it as leverage and not drop them, based on the amount of effort it would take to convert over to a new tool, but he said no, and followed up with, their company values do not align with ours, which I thought was a great way to think about it. We awarded the contract to the next highest rated vendor, and based on the CIO's directive, took the other company off our list of approved vendors. They never saw a dime after we sunsetted their system. By then, my choice of candidate had moved on to another opportunity, so I feel no sympathy for that vendor. They cost me someone I'm sure would have ended up being my boss someday, and screwed around so much that we just didn't want to associate with them. Total loss to me? Time and a great prospect. Total loss to them? Millions of dollars in revenue. Honestly, it's nice to hear that even when it comes to a subject like some companies out there relating to what they spend their money on, that they're willing to make some decisions considering the humanity aspect of it. Because, a lot of companies might not care at all. And our final story of the day is from Uncommon Optimist. Cheat on me and brag to your friends? Enjoy deportation? I met this girl, 22 at the time, while I, 30-year-old male at the time, was working in a national park, and she was a housekeeper on a work visa. We instantly hit it off, and within a month, we were in a relationship. We even had a solid long-distance arrangement where we would visit each other on recreational visas in our respective off-seasons. I'd spend a few months in Romania or meet her at some vacation destination. Then she'd spend a few months in the States. This went on for about 2 years, and eventually the conversation came up with her family about possibly moving her to the States permanently. Romania never really recovered from the Ceausescu regime, and political and economic corruption makes life pretty unpleasant for a lot of people. Her marrying and moving to the US meant that her mom wouldn't have to worry about her daughter having a good life. I arranged for sponsorship and proposed to her. It seemed like my dreams were about to come true. Then, about a month after she's all settled in, I get a message from her best friend back home. What followed were a year's worth of screenshots wherein she bragged about conning me into paying for her residency, while she cheated on me with 8 different men. In her friend's words, "You're a good man and you don't deserve this." So over the following 2 weeks, I reported her to ICE in Homeland Security for a conversation her brother and I had over a bottle at one point. He bragged about how he had done time in prison for smuggling weapons to Turkish terrorists, and how she'd been his lookout on several occasions. As you might imagine, in the War on Terror days, this was not taken lightly. She was immediately arrested and deported and put on a permanent no-entry terror watch list. Want to take advantage of me and cheat? Have fun never coming back to the States. Apparently after the fact, she, both of her brothers, and most of her cousins all sent OP very specific kinds of threats. But apparently their mom congratulated OP and said they could use a son like OP. So funny enough, the mom actually endorsed, standing up to a cheater. And honestly, I can't really fault OP for what they did. I mean, it kind of sucks for this person to get forever locked out of escaping a country that they're not comfortable being in, but their attempt to get out was all about tearing another person down and bragging about it. So maybe they don't deserve to leave. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another absolutely awesome revenge story, check out that video on the left. Or, if you missed my latest video, check out the video on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.